Ambassador Sarah Chen straightened her uniform as the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. The sight before her never failed to impress, even after 3 years of diplomatic service. The circular chamber stretched upward like the inside of a vast cathedral, with tiered seating arrangements accommodating hundreds of species from across known space. The Etherian delegates floated in their crystalline pods, their translucent forms shimmering with barely contained energy. The insectoid Zephyrians clicked and chittered from their specialized seating, their compound eyes tracking her movement. Massive Goliathan representatives sat in reinforced sections designed to support their rocky, boulder-like physiques. Each species had evolved differently, adapted to their unique worlds, but they all shared one thing in common today. Their attention was focused entirely on her. At the center of the chamber stood the speaker's platform, where High Counselor Vexai of the Altarian Collective waited. The amphibian-like being's throat sac pulsed rhythmically, a sign Sarah had learned indicated either deep contemplation or barely restrained irritation. Given the circumstances, she suspected the latter. Ambassador Chen, Vexai's voice resonated through the chamber's translation systems, each species hearing it in their native tongue. Please approach the testimony circle. Sarah walked forward, her footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. She could feel thousands of eyes, sensors, and other sensory organs following her movement. The testimony circle was a simple raised platform surrounded by truth field generators, devices that could detect deception in most known species. Humanity had volunteered to be subject to them, much to the Council's surprise. Ambassador, Vexai began, consulting a holographic display that materialized before him. We have called this emergency session to address growing concerns about humanity's approach to conflict resolution. In the mere 50 years since your species joined the galactic community, there have been numerous incidents that require explanation. Sarah nodded calmly. She had been expecting this for months. I'm here to provide whatever clarification the Council requires, High Counselor. A murmur rippled through the chamber. The crystalline harmony representative, a being of living mineral that communicated through harmonic resonances, chimed a complex sequence that the translators rendered as concern mixed with curiosity. Vexai gestured, and the chamber's central holodisplay activated, showing a star map marked with various colored indicators. Let us begin with the Xerian incident. Your species encountered a hive-class predator species that had been terrorizing trade routes for decades. Previous Council-sanctioned expeditions had attempted diplomatic contact 17 times over 8 years. All failed. The Xerian Collective had consumed 3 entire worlds, processing their populations into biomass. The holodisplay zoomed in on a specific system, showing detailed tactical readouts. Humanity's response was unprecedented. Rather than attempting further diplomacy or requesting a formal Council military intervention, a single human fleet engaged the entire collective. The engagement lasted 47 hours. When it concluded, the Xerian threat had been completely eliminated. Sarah watched as the display showed the aftermath. Scattered debris fields where massive bioships had once been, and most surprisingly, 3 restored worlds with their populations somehow rescued and rehabilitated. High Counselor, Sarah said, her voice steady, humanity acted within the established protocols for dealing with confirmed hostile entities. The Xerian Collective had been formally classified as a galactic threat. Yes, Vexai acknowledged, but the manner of engagement raises questions. How did one human fleet accomplish what our combined forces had deemed impossible? And more concerning, how did you manage to reverse the bioprocessing of entire populations? Our best scientists insisted that such a reversal was theoretically impossible. The Zephyrian delegate, Hive Queen Zizix, spoke up, her translated voice carrying an edge of suspicion. The humans arrived with technologies we had never seen, energy weapons that seemed to specifically target Xerian biosignatures, defensive systems that adapted in real time to biological attacks. It was as if they had fought such creatures before. Sarah glanced around the chamber, reading the mood. Fear, suspicion, curiosity, and something else. Respect, perhaps, but tinged with wariness. The truth is, Sarah began, humanity has faced similar threats before, though not on an interstellar scale. We call them biological disasters, pandemics, ecological collapses. Our history is filled with species-ending scenarios that we've had to overcome. When we encountered the Xerian Collective, we recognized the pattern. Pattern? Vexai's throat sac pulsed more rapidly. Life-consuming life without balance or purpose. We've seen it on our own world, fought it, learned from it. The tools we brought to bear against the Xerians were adaptations of systems we developed for our own survival. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see representatives exchanging glances, communicating through their various means. The weight of her words hung in the air like a challenge. Finally, Vexhai spoke again. This brings us to our primary concern, Ambassador. In 50 years, humanity has resolved 17 conflicts that the Council had deemed intractable. Each time, your methods have been effective beyond our understanding. We must ask, what exactly makes humanity so uniquely suited to violence? Sarah took a deep breath. This was the question she had been preparing for her entire diplomatic career. The answer would either cement humanity's place in the galactic community or mark them as a threat to be contained. The silence in the chamber stretched like a held breath. Sarah looked around at the assembled representatives, each species waiting for her response with their own unique expressions of anticipation. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, but standing here, surrounded by the representatives of civilizations spanning millions of years, the weight of speaking for all humanity felt crushing. High Counselor Vexhai, honored delegates, Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. To understand humanity's approach to conflict, you must first understand our origin story. The holodisplay shifted, showing a blue-green world rotating slowly in space. Earth appeared peaceful from this distance, its swirling clouds and vast oceans giving no hint of the struggles that had shaped its dominant species. Earth is what we call a death world, Sarah continued, watching as several delegates visibly recoiled at the term. Our planet has experienced 5 major extinction events in its history. Each time, life was nearly completely wiped out. The survivors had to adapt, evolve, or die. This cycle repeated for billions of years. The display zoomed in, showing various geological epochs. Images of massive volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, ice ages, and atmospheric changes flickered across the screen. Every species that evolved on Earth did so under constant pressure, not just from natural disasters, but from each other. We call it evolution through conflict, survival of the fittest. For humanity specifically, we emerged during one of the most challenging periods in our world's history. Counselor Thane of the Peaceful Meridian Collective raised a tentacled appendage. Their species had evolved on a world with stable weather patterns and abundant resources, achieving consciousness through cooperation rather than competition. Ambassador Chen, are you suggesting that violence is inherent to human nature? Sarah shook her head. Not violence, Counselor Thane, adaptation. Humans learn to survive by becoming the ultimate generalists. We can eat almost anything, live in nearly any environment, and most importantly, we can find patterns in chaos and create solutions from desperation. She gestured to the holodisplay, which now showed early human history. Images of primitive humans working together to hunt massive predators, building shelter against impossible odds, and developing tools from whatever materials were available. When humanity was still developing, we shared our world with creatures that could kill us easily. Massive predators, deadly diseases, extreme weather. We survived not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most adaptable. We learned to work together in ways that other species couldn't match. The Zephyrian delegate, Hive Queen Zizix, clicked her mandibles in what Sarah recognized as confusion. But your species fights each other constantly. Your historical records show endless wars and conflicts. How is this cooperation? Sarah nodded, having expected this question. That's perhaps the most important point, Your Majesty. Humans fight, yes, but we also learn from every conflict. Each war taught us new tactics, new technologies, new ways of working together. More importantly, it taught us how to recognize threats and respond to them quickly. The display shifted again, showing human technological development through the ages. Stone tools became metal weapons, which became firearms, which became space-age technology. Each advancement was driven by necessity, often military necessity. When we encountered the Xerian collective, we recognized them immediately as a pattern we'd seen before. A species that consumes resources without regard for sustainability, that views other life forms only as fuel for its own growth. On Earth, we call these invasive species, and we've developed countless methods for dealing with them. High Counselor Vexhai's throat sac pulsed thoughtfully. You speak of patterns, Ambassador, but the scale is vastly different. The Xerians commanded technology beyond anything in your historical experience. True, Sarah agreed, but the fundamental principles remain the same. Overwhelming force applied at critical weakness points, disruption of supply lines, turning the enemy's strength against them. These are concepts humanity has refined over thousands of years of conflict. The chamber stirred as delegates conferred among themselves. Sarah could see the translation of her words was causing some distress among the more peaceful species. Counselor Riasha of the Crystalline Harmony resonated a complex harmonic pattern that translated as deep concern. Ambassador, your words suggest that humanity views every encounter as a potential conflict. Is this why your species has been so aggressive in your diplomatic approaches? Sarah paused, recognizing the delicate ground she was treading. Several human diplomatic initiatives had indeed been viewed as overly forward or pushy by galactic standards. Counselor Riasha, we prefer to call it proactive rather than aggressive. When we see a problem, our instinct is to solve it quickly and decisively. This sometimes puts us at odds with species that prefer longer deliberation periods. Like the Centauri trade dispute, interjected Delegate Morgan of the Traders Consortium. Your negotiators reached a resolution in 3 days that our arbitrators had been working on for 2 years. And the asteroid mining rights issue, added another delegate. Humanity proposed a solution that satisfied all parties, but it required completely restructuring agreements that had been in place for decades. Sarah could see where this was leading. The delegates weren't just concerned about humanity's military capabilities. They were worried about their diplomatic and economic impact as well. Honored delegates, Sarah said, raising her hands for attention, I think we need to address the fundamental misunderstanding at the heart of these concerns. You see humanity's rapid problem-solving as aggression or hostility, but that's not what drives us. The chamber fell quiet again, waiting for her explanation. What drives us is a deep, instinctual understanding that problems left unsolved become bigger problems. Threats ignored become disasters. Conflicts delayed become wars. We've learned this lesson over and over throughout our history, often at terrible cost. She paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the point she hoped would shift their perspective. We're not hostile, honored delegates. We're just very, very good at recognizing when someone else is. The weight of Sarah's last statement settled over the chamber like a storm front. She could see the delegates processing her words, some with visible unease. The truth was often uncomfortable, but it was necessary. High Counselor Vexai activated a new holographic display, this one showing a timeline of galactic conflicts over the past millennium. Let us examine this claim more closely, Ambassador. You state that humanity is skilled at recognizing hostility, yet your species has intervened in conflicts that the Council had classified as internal disputes or territorial disagreements. The display highlighted several incidents. The first showed a remote system where 2 species had been engaged in what appeared to be a minor border skirmish for decades. The Keth-Vraxian War, Vexai continued. Our mediators had been working to establish a peaceful resolution for 37 years. Both species claimed historical rights to the same star system. Standard procedure called for extended arbitration, yet humanity intervened after only 6 months of observation. Sarah studied the tactical display, remembering the briefings she'd received about the incident. High Counselor, our analysis showed that this wasn't a territorial dispute. It was systematic genocide disguised as one. A ripple of shock ran through the chamber. The Keth and Vraxians were both considered civilized species, members of the Council in good standing. That's a serious accusation, Ambassador, said Delegate Kethmer, the Keth representative, their crystalline features darkening with what Sarah recognized as anger. My people engaged in honorable warfare according to established conventions. Sarah turned to face the Keth delegate directly. Delegate Kethmer, did your forces target civilian population centers on Vraxian colonies? Only military installations and infrastructure targets, the Keth representative replied stiffly. Infrastructure that included water purification plants, medical facilities, and food distribution centers, Sarah continued calmly. The same infrastructure that civilian populations needed to survive. The chamber's atmosphere grew tense. Several delegates were now exchanging urgent communications with their homeworlds. Delegate Vraxian, speaking for the Vraxians, interjected. The humans discovered that Keth forces were using biological weapons designed to target Vraxian metabolism specifically. These weapons would have made our species' homeworlds uninhabitable within a generation. The holodisplay updated to show molecular analyses and biological models. The evidence was damning. The Keth had indeed developed weapons that would effectively sterilize Vraxian worlds while leaving them habitable for Keth colonization. How did humanity detect this? Asked Counselor Thane. Our own observers found no evidence of biological warfare. Sarah pulled up additional data on her personal display. Because your observers were looking for conventional biological weapons. Humanity has experience with extinction-level biological threats. We recognize the patterns even when they're disguised as something else. She gestured to the molecular display. This compound would have appeared to your analysts as an industrial pollutant, a byproduct of Keth manufacturing. But human scientists recognized it immediately as a targeted biological weapon because we've faced similar threats on our own world. High Counselor Vexai's throat sac pulsed rapidly. You're saying that humanity's history with biological disasters allows you to detect threats that our more advanced civilizations cannot. Not just biological threats, Sarah replied. Pattern recognition is humanity's greatest strength. We see the warning signs because we've learned to watch for them. It's kept us alive for millions of years. The display shifted to show another incident, the Silicon Valley Mining Collective dispute. Another example, Vexai said. The Silicon Valley incident. 3 corporate entities were engaged in a legal dispute over mining rights to a dead system. The Council's Commercial Arbitration Division was handling the case through proper channels. Humanity's intervention resulted in the discovery of what you claimed was an illegal weapons development program. Delegate Silken of the mining collective's antennae twitched with agitation. The humans had no legal authority to inspect our facilities. Their actions violated sovereignty protocols. Sarah nodded. You're right, Delegate Silken. We had no legal authority, but we had moral authority. Explain, demanded Vexai. The mining operation was a cover for the development of planet-killing weapons, Sarah said simply. While the Council debated jurisdiction and legal procedures, the collective was 3 months away from completing devices that could crack planetary cores. Their intended targets were the home worlds of their mining competitors. The chamber erupted in shocked communications. Several delegates demanded verification from their home governments. The evidence was hidden in the mining reports themselves, Sarah continued over the commotion. Disguised as geological surveys and ore composition analyses, but the patterns were clear to anyone who knew what to look for. And humans knew what to look for because, prompted Vexai. Because we've written papers on theoretical planet-killing weapons. Human scientists and military theorists have explored every possible way to destroy a world, not because we want to, but because we need to know how to defend against such attacks. The truth hit the chamber like a physical blow. The implications were staggering. Counselor Riashaz's harmonic resonance carried notes of fear. You're telling us that humanity has researched how to destroy entire worlds. Yes, Sarah said without hesitation. We've also researched how to survive the destruction of worlds, how to evacuate planetary populations, how to restart ecosystems on dead planets, and how to detect when someone else is planning to destroy worlds. It's all connected. She paused, looking around at the assembled delegates. This is what you don't understand about humanity. We don't study warfare because we love violence. We study it because we want to prevent it. Every weapon we've ever developed, we've also developed defenses against. Every threat we've identified, we've created countermeasures for. The chamber fell into a contemplative silence. Sarah could see the delegates struggling with a fundamental shift in perspective. Finally, High Counselor Vexai spoke. Ambassador Chen, are you saying that humanity's apparent aggression is actually a form of preemptive defense? Sarah considered the question carefully. High Counselor, I'm saying that humanity has learned to recognize patterns that lead to catastrophe. When we see those patterns beginning to form, we act to prevent them. Sometimes that looks like aggression to species that haven't learned to read the warning signs. And you believe this gives you the right to intervene in galactic affairs? No, Sarah replied firmly. It gives us the responsibility to intervene. There's a difference. The distinction hung in the air like a challenge, and Sarah could see that the council was finally beginning to understand what they were truly dealing with when it came to humanity. The chamber remained in contemplative silence for several minutes. Sarah could see delegates communicating with their homeworlds, consulting databases, and reviewing human actions through this new lens of understanding. The revelation that humanity's interventions might be preventative rather than aggressive was clearly challenging their fundamental assumptions. High Counselor Vexhai finally broke the silence. Ambassador Chen, your explanation raises as many concerns as it addresses. If humanity can recognize patterns that lead to galactic catastrophes, why not simply alert the Council? Why take unilateral action? Sarah had anticipated this question. It was perhaps the most important one of the entire hearing. High Counselor, may I show you something? At Vexhai's nod, Sarah activated her personal display and projected it for the chamber to see. The hologram showed a detailed timeline of human attempts to work within established council procedures. The Rimward Plague incident, 18 months ago, Sarah began. Humanity detected the early stages of what we recognized as an engineered pandemic spreading through the outer colonies. We followed proper protocols and submitted our findings to the Council Health Advisory Board. The timeline showed a series of communications between human officials and council bureaucrats. We provided detailed biological analyses, projected spread patterns, and recommended immediate quarantine procedures. The Health Advisory Board classified our report as preliminary findings requiring further study and assigned it to a subcommittee for evaluation. Delegate Morgoth of the Health Advisory Board shifted uncomfortably in their biopod. Standard procedure requires thorough verification of all health threats. We could not implement galaxy-wide quarantine measures based on preliminary human analysis. The evaluation process had a projected timeline of 8 months, Sarah continued. Our models showed the plague would reach critical mass and spread beyond containment in 6 weeks. The hologram updated to show 2 projections: the Council's careful, methodical approach versus humanity's rapid response timeline. So humanity acted unilaterally, Vexhai observed. Yes, Sarah admitted. We implemented quarantine measures using our own resources, developed countermeasures, and distributed them to affected systems without waiting for council approval. The result, asked Councillor Thane. The plague was contained within 4 weeks. Total casualties, 847 individuals. The Council's own post-incident analysis concluded that following standard procedures would have resulted in casualties numbering in the billions. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The magnitude of what humanity had prevented was clear to everyone present. Delegate Morgoth spoke quietly. We had no way of knowing the threat was so immediate. But humans did, Sarah replied gently. Because we recognize the patterns, we've seen how quickly biological threats can spread and mutate. Our history taught us that when dealing with extinction-level events, hours matter, not months. High Counselor Vexhai activated another display. This brings us to the most concerning incident of all, Ambassador, the Void-touched crisis. Sarah tensed. She had been dreading this topic, but she knew it was inevitable. The hologram showed deep space telemetry from the galaxy's edge, where something had been detected moving between stars. The readings were unlike anything in Council databases. 3 months ago, Vexhai continued, long-range sensors detected anomalous readings from the galactic periphery. The Council's Science Division classified them as potentially natural phenomena worthy of investigation. We organized a joint research expedition with contributions from 17 member species. Sarah watched the data unfold, remembering the growing sense of dread she had felt when human analysts first reviewed the sensor readings. However, before the expedition could launch, humanity declared the entire region a quarantine zone and deployed significant military assets to enforce it. When questioned, human authorities claimed the readings indicated a Class Omega threat. No such classification exists in Council taxonomy. The Chamber's attention focused entirely on Sarah. This incident had occurred only recently, and many delegates still didn't understand what had happened. Ambassador, Vexhai said carefully, humanity's response to the Void-touched appears to be the most extreme example of unilateral action in recorded galactic history. You deployed enough firepower to glass an entire system and forbade any approach to the affected region. Explain this. Sarah took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's future relationship with the galactic community. The entities you detected, she began, are what humanity calls void-touched. We have no direct experience with them, but we have extensive theoretical frameworks for dealing with their type of threat. She activated her own display, showing complex mathematical models and theoretical physics calculations. The Council's sensors detected what appeared to be large objects moving through interstellar space at significant fractions of light speed. Your analysts assumed these were ships or artificial constructs of some kind. The hologram showed the Council's analysis: geometric shapes, energy signatures, and movement patterns consistent with advanced technology. But human analysis reached a different conclusion. The objects weren't ships. They were converted matter. Specifically, they were converted planets, stars, and entire solar systems that had been transformed into something else. Shocked communications erupted throughout the chamber. Several delegates demanded immediate verification from their science divisions. The void touched aren't a species in any sense that the Council understands, Sarah continued over the commotion. They're a fundamental transformation of matter and energy that spreads by contact. Everything they touch becomes part of them. Planets, stars, living beings, technology, all of it gets converted into more void-touched. Counselor Riash's harmonic resonance carried pure terror. You're describing a form of existence that could consume the entire galaxy. Yes, Sarah said simply, that's exactly what we're describing. High Counselor Vexai's throat sac had stopped pulsing entirely, and humanity's solution was to create a military blockade. Our solution was to establish a containment zone until we could develop countermeasures, Sarah corrected. The military deployment wasn't meant to fight the void touched directly. It was meant to ensure that nothing, no ships, no probes, no communications, could carry the transformation effect beyond the quarantine boundary. But how did you develop countermeasures against something you'd never encountered? Asked Delegate Kethmer. Sarah smiled grimly. Because humanity has been preparing for this type of threat for over a century. We call them gray goo scenarios, existential transformation events, reality viruses. Our science fiction writers, military theorists, and philosophers have explored thousands of variations of this concept. She gestured to the theoretical models floating in the hologram. When our sensors detected the void touched, our scientists immediately recognized the pattern and began implementing countermeasures we had already designed. Not for this specific threat, but for this type of threat. And these countermeasures worked? Asked Vexai. They worked, Sarah confirmed. The void touched have been neutralized. The quarantine zone is being gradually reduced as we verify the complete elimination of the transformation effect. The chamber fell into stunned silence. The implications were staggering. Humanity had single-handedly prevented what could have been the end of galactic civilization. Finally, High Counselor Vexai spoke. Ambassador Chen, I believe the Council is beginning to understand humanity's perspective. But this raises a new question. If your species is so effective at recognizing and preventing galactic threats, what assurance do we have that humanity itself won't become such a threat? The question hung in the air like a sword. Sarah had known this moment would come, the inevitable fear that a species capable of preventing galactic threats might itself become one. She could see it in the posture of every delegate, the way they had unconsciously shifted to create more distance between themselves and the human section of the chamber. High Counselor Vexai's throat sac pulsed slowly, deliberately. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that surpass our understanding, Ambassador. You recognize patterns we cannot see, deploy technologies we cannot comprehend, and take actions that shape the fate of billions. What prevents humanity from deciding that the galaxy would be better served under human guidance? Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of as many delegates as possible. Some stared back with curiosity, others with fear, and a few with something approaching respect. She realized that her next words would determine not just humanity's place in the galactic community, but possibly the future of galactic civilization itself. High Counselor, she began, may I tell you about the most important lesson humanity has ever learned? At Vexai's nod, Sarah activated the holographic display one final time. Instead of showing star charts or tactical analyses, the display showed Earth. but not the peaceful blue marble from earlier presentations. This Earth was scarred, wounded, with vast areas of lifeless terrain and poisoned oceans. This is Earth during what we call the Convergence Wars, approximately 800 years ago. Humanity had reached a critical point in our development. We had the technology to reshape our world, the weapons to destroy our enemies completely, and the knowledge to impose our will on any who opposed us. The hologram showed massive cities burning, weapons that could crack continents, and billions of humans engaged in conflicts that made ancient wars look like children's games. Several human factions decided that the world would be better if they were in complete control. They had the same reasoning you fear from us now. They could see problems others couldn't, they could implement solutions others wouldn't accept, and they believed they had the right to impose their vision on everyone else. The display showed the progression of the wars, the escalating destruction, the mounting casualties that numbered in the billions. The result was almost the extinction of our species and the near destruction of our world. We learned something that no amount of theoretical knowledge could have taught us. Sarah paused, letting the weight of the images sink in before continuing. We learned that being right about problems doesn't give you the right to impose solutions. Being more capable doesn't make you more worthy of power, and being able to prevent disasters doesn't make you qualified to rule over others. The hologram shifted to show Earth's recovery, damaged ecosystems being restored, ruined cities being rebuilt, and most importantly, humans working together despite their differences. The survivors of the Convergence Wars established what we call the principle of earned consent. It states that no individual or group has the authority to make decisions for others without their explicit agreement, regardless of the righteousness of their cause or the clarity of their vision. Delegate Morgan of the Traders Consortium leaned forward. But humanity has intervened in galactic affairs without explicit consent from the affected parties. True, Sarah acknowledged, but we've never imposed permanent control or claimed authority over others. Every intervention has been followed by a withdrawal once the immediate threat was resolved. We prevent disasters, we don't create dependencies. High Counselor Vexhai studied the data streaming across his display. Show us your evidence for this claim. Sarah called up a comprehensive list of human interventions over the past 50 years. The Xerian incident. After eliminating the threat, human forces withdrew completely. The affected systems were left to rebuild under their own governance. The Kethraxian War. We exposed the genocide plot and provided evidence, but the final peace negotiations were handled entirely by council mediators. The Silicon Valley Weapons Program. We provided proof of the illegal activities to council authorities and stepped back while legal proceedings took their course. The pattern was clear. In every case, humanity had acted to prevent catastrophe but had refused to claim any permanent authority or control over the resolution. The Rimward Plague, Sarah continued. We developed and distributed the cure freely to all affected systems without patent restrictions or payment requirements. The Void touched crisis. Once the threat was neutralized, we immediately began transferring our countermeasure technology to Council science divisions. Counselor Thane's tentacles writhed with what Sarah recognized as confusion. Ambassador, this behavior pattern is unusual. Most species that develop superior capabilities eventually seek to leverage them for political or economic advantage. Sarah nodded. That's because most species haven't learned what humanity learned during the Convergence Wars. Power corrupts, but absolute power doesn't just corrupt the wielder, it corrupts the entire system around them. A galaxy ruled by humanity wouldn't be safer or more efficient. It would be stagnant, dependent, and ultimately weaker. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Each species in this chamber brings unique perspectives and capabilities. The Etherians understand energy manipulation in ways humans never could. The crystalline harmony has mastered cooperative decision-making across vast populations. The Zephyrians have developed biological technologies that surpass anything in human science. A galaxy under human control would lose all of these advantages. The chamber stirred as delegates began to understand the implications of Sarah's argument. Furthermore, Sarah continued, humanity's ability to recognize threats isn't infallible. We see patterns based on our own experience and evolution. There are types of dangers that we might miss entirely because they fall outside our historical frame of reference. We need the diversity of galactic civilization to provide complete coverage against all possible threats. High Counselor Vexhai was quiet for a long moment, consulting with advisors and reviewing data streams. Finally, he spoke. Ambassador Chen, if humanity has no interest in ruling the galaxy, what do you seek from your membership in the Council? Sarah smiled. Partnership, High Counselor. Humanity offers our pattern recognition abilities, our rapid response capabilities, and our threat assessment technologies to serve the common good. In return, we hope to learn from the wisdom, perspectives, and capabilities of other species. We want to be part of a galactic community that's stronger than any single species could be alone. And if the Council votes to restrict human activities based on concerns about your proactive nature. Sarah's expression became serious. Then we would respect that decision and work within whatever constraints the Council establishes. But we would also continue to monitor for existential threats to galactic civilization. If we detected such a threat, we would present our findings to the Council through proper channels and request permission to act. And if permission were denied, the chamber fell silent. This was the ultimate test of humanity's commitment to galactic cooperation. Sarah met Vexhai's gaze directly. Then we would respect the Council's decision and accept the consequences. We believe that a galaxy that makes its own mistakes is preferable to one that accepts our protection at the cost of its freedom. The silence stretched for several minutes as the full weight of humanity's position became clear. They were offering their capabilities as a gift, not wielding them as a threat. Finally, High Counselor Vexhai's throat sac resumed its steady pulse. The Council will deliberate on what we have learned here today, but I believe I can speak for many delegates when I say that humanity's commitment to earned consent and voluntary cooperation addresses our primary concerns. He paused, looking around the chamber at his fellow delegates. Perhaps the question is not whether humanity is too hostile for galactic civilization, but whether galactic civilization has been too passive in the face of real threats. The evidence suggests that we have much to learn from humanity's approach to recognizing and preventing disasters. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The path forward wouldn't be simple, but for the first time since joining the galactic community, humanity had been truly understood. The galaxy was still learning to live with a species that treated vigilance as a virtue rather than a burden. But perhaps, in time, they would come to appreciate having guardians who had learned that the greatest power was knowing when not to use it.